Attorney General Paxton assigns me, he always calls me his offensive coordinator. That's a term I like. He was our head coach. I was the offensive coordinator. I get assigned with coordinating the Texas v. Biden docket, which was a robust docket. It's that 3 years, among my other experiences, whether it's a Marine or working on the Texas Supreme Court, my time in private practice, my 2 years with Ted Cruz as his chief, my elevation to the Justice Department under President Trump and Attorney General Bondi. But really, it's those 3 years that I think give Texans the confidence that I've got the battle scars to really prove that I'm ready to succeed, Ken, as the next Texas AG.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Hey, welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we talk to men and women who are doing interesting things to make the Lone Star State even better, and that sometimes includes visiting with those folks running for office. I'm sitting here with Aaron Reitz, you're seeking to be the 52nd Attorney General of the state of Texas. There's sometimes a lag when we film these, when they go live, that kind of thing, which allows us to be more of a conversation about you rather than about the issue of the day and the topic of the week and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Aaron Reitz. So there'll be a lot of opportunity. We'll be talking to the other candidates. A lot of opportunities to talk about those other people. Let's talk about Aaron.
Okay.
You went to high school in San Antonio and headed off to Texas A&M.
That's right.
Whoop.
That's right.
Walk me through your decision to become a Marine.
Yeah, so I'm going to age myself for a second, even though I have a much more advanced hairstyle. 9/11 happened when I was a freshman in high school.
Right.
And I didn't go to just any middle school or high school in San Antonio. I went to Bush Middle School and Reagan High School. And so you could imagine a very patriotic part of town in San Antonio. 9/11 happened when I'm a freshman. This then shaped my teen years. And I absolutely believe that there were bad guys overseas. We needed young men needed to sign up and go over there, take care of business, and liberate Iraq, liberate Afghanistan, as long as we have, constitutions printed in their language. So that's a lesson that I learned a little bit differently once I went there. But I knew that I wanted to go into the military. And once I decided that I wanted to go into the military, I knew that Texas A&M was going to be my destination. I don't come from a military family, so I didn't really fully appreciate the differences between Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. I mean, I knew what they were, right? But it was when I got to A&M that I got exposure to the United States Marine Corps, and I said, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it this way. Plus, they got the best uniforms. So I said, I'm going to be a Marine. I applied for an ROTC scholarship. When I got there, I was in the Corps Cadets. I was in Rebel E2 with Reveille, the mascot, and got an ROTC contract, and then spent 3 years getting ready to commission in the Marines.
So as a Marine, every Marine is a Marine.
Yes.
You don't got, you don't have back of the line Marines. Everyone's expected to be an infantry guy.
That's right. Yeah.
But you were also a lawyer.
Yeah.
Walk me through the differences between
Sure. Well, I didn't go into the Marines as a lawyer.
Right.
So, we had Texas A&M was my undergrad, and then I went as a regular line officer. I was with 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. Their nickname is the Magnificent Bastards, which is the coolest nickname, I think, of all the Marine battalions. And shortly after getting to my unit and taking over my platoon, we got instructions that we were headed to Afghanistan 6 months from then. And I went there. I was assigned to our battalion's embedded training team. So I actually lived with the Afghan National Army. So we had the American side of the base, and then you go through a different sort of portal, basically, and then you go into the Afghan side. And so I lived with the Afghans for 7 months, from the fall of 11 to the spring of 12. And we were in the northern Helmand province. We were in the middle of nowhere. And I had an amazing but frustrating experience, but I'm thankful that I had it because I learned a lot about foreign policy. I formed opinions about foreign engagements and nation building and so on and so forth. My son, who's now 13, was born actually while I was away. And so when I met him, he was about 4 or 5 months old. And when I got home, I just thought, look, the Marines, on active duty was sort of an adventure for my 20s. But I don't know, some guys are called to do it for a career. As I prayerfully considered what to do next, I felt like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit captain, and then I may want to explore something else. I'd always been intellectually interested in the law, potentially going to law school. So took the LSAT, the law school admissions test, knew that I could come back home to Texas, and decided to go to UT. And then, here we are, fast forward.
All right, so I want to stick with your experience in Afghanistan and your experience as a Marine for a second. Walk me through what we saw happen during the Biden administration.
Yeah.
A lot of your men, a lot of your colleagues, like fellow Marines, a lot of our friends, gave their lives there. They gave, or if they didn't give their lives, they gave some of the best parts of their lives there.
Yeah.
How did the Biden administration's approach to Afghanistan impact you?
It was, I think you're keying in on some important themes. It was extraordinarily disappointing. It was infuriating to see the shame that President Biden brought upon our country and our military, given the sort of haphazard, totally sloppy, politically driven, nonsensical method in which they decided to withdraw. Now, I want to be clear. When I was in Afghanistan, we had been there. By the time I got there, we had already been there for 10 years. Okay. And I may have felt like our involvement in Afghanistan was righteous and justified in the aftermath of 9/11. But fast forward 10 years later, we engaged in what is commonly referred to as mission creep, right? First, it was go there and kill bad guys. I support that. I always support killing bad guys. Even as Attorney General, I will support killing bad guys. And then it became nation building and constructing schools and building wells and planting fields that are alternatives to opium, but instead we want to give them wheat or corn or something like that. A complete mess. And so you get there, and even though I thank God for that experience in Afghanistan, it was a very disillusioning experience to be there because you had believed a certain thing about going there in the first place. And then you get there and you realize, what am I doing here? In my battalion, we lost 5 men while I was over there, and several more had lost, like you said, a part of yourselves. And within about a year after my leaving our area of operation in the northern Helmand province, that area had been retaken by the Taliban even. So your question was with respect to the whole country of Afghanistan, but even my AO within a year had just been reconquered by the Taliban. And then fast forward.
Anything about those schools?
Yeah.
Why are Marines building schools? Why are all these nice? Yeah, and now those are now back in the hands.
They're back in the hands of the bad guys. The fields of wheat are now plowed back over, and it's opium again, right? The young women are put back into the terrible situations that they're unfortunately put into. And so, nevertheless, even for so-called lost causes, you devote your time, your blood, your sweat, your training. I missed my son's birth to go to Afghanistan, to go fight the war on terror. Nevertheless, even though I was sympathetic to the argument that, hey, we've got to withdraw from Afghanistan in a way that is advantageous to American foreign policy and our national interest, the way that we do it is not the manner in which Biden did it. So it's very frustrating. But now that President Trump is president, I see foreign policy in the way that it ought to be. Peace through strength, decisive military action that doesn't necessarily get us involved in a never-ending quagmire. And so you contrast Biden-era failures on foreign policy with Trump-era successes on foreign policy. And I'm very encouraged. I think guys like me who went over there are happy to see a commander-in-chief who gets it on foreign policy.
All right, let's talk about being a lawyer. You go through law school, you do the typical lawyer thing for a while. You ended up, though, I want to say stumbling in, that sounds inappropriate for a Marine, but you somehow advanced your way into a couple of political staff positions.
Yeah.
Tell me about working at the Attorney General's office.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, even just going back to some of I went to law school very mission and purpose driven, right? I didn't just attend law school and just sort of take classes and coast. I was extremely involved in the conservative legal movement in law school. I was very purpose driven. I knew exactly why I was going to law school. I knew that I wanted to, even though I was going to hang up my uniform active duty, I'm still in the reserve, by the way, but I can sometimes get away with not shaving, that I was going to law school to continue to fulfill the spirit of the oath that I had swore when I was a Marine, to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And law school, that shaped my experience at law school. It's why when I was in my second year, I was president of the Texas Federalist Society. We were named the best chapter in the country by headquarters up in D.C. During my second year of law school, I was editor-in-chief of the Texas Review of Law and Politics, which is a conservative legal academic journal. So we led a team of almost 80 student editors to advance conservative scholarship. And then, even though I was in private practice for a little while, I went to Houston. I clerked on the Texas Supreme Court for now Chief Justice Jimmy Blacklock, who remains a tremendous mentor. He was actually Governor Abbott's first appointee to the Texas Supreme Court.
Right.
And so when he came in, I followed him. It's what brought us back from Houston to Austin, which got me right back into sort of the mix of state, political, legal, the arena where I wanted to be, not just doing sort of the boilerplate contracts for mergers and acquisitions, even though I have respect for lawyers that do that. It wasn't for me. So after clerking, went back into private practice, and I had gotten to know Attorney General Paxton in those intervening years. And I reached out to him in the summer of 2020, ended up joining his executive team in October of 2020. And it was on my second day on the job that what I call the coup happened. And it took me just a couple of days to figure out exactly what was going on. I knew that this was a political hit job, a well-coordinated political hit job to try to take out one of the most effective attorney generals in the country. I knew where my allegiances lied. And so it was clear. I looked at Ken in the eye and I said, "Sir, I'm with you through thick and thin." And then I did 3 years with Ken, and the election happened. But we had a great time in the AG's office. Look, notwithstanding those issues, the election happens. All the mainstream outlets call the election for Biden. Attorney General Paxton and I and many other patriots, including the president, were very skeptical of what we saw with the 2020 election. And one of the first big actions we took is we filed Texas v. Pennsylvania, challenging the constitutionality of the manner in which 4 states ran their elections. Okay. We understand that there were a lot of other legal theories spinning around on fraud and the machines, and there are a lot of merits to some of those arguments. We wanted to make a rifle shot argument, which is a state has a basis, a state like Texas has a basis to go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court to challenge the manner in which other states, in this case it was 4, were violating certain express provisions of the Constitution. Here, the Electors Clause of the Constitution, right, which directs state legislatures. State legislatures have the sole authority to manage their state's elections, not federal judges, not state judges, not governors, not appointed boards, state legislatures. And so during the COVID era, state legislative prerogatives in at least 4 states were usurped by state judges, federal judges, or executive branch actors. And so we challenged them, and there was no other forum to go to but the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, we didn't make it through. We got poured out on standing, but 2 of those justices dissented from the denial, specifically Alito and Thomas, believing that at least the case should be heard. We don't know where the law is going to lead us. We don't know where the facts are going to lead us. But we at least believe that this case warrants a hearing. And unfortunately, we didn't prevail on that. But Attorney General Paxton, me, and some of my colleagues showed the nation that there was hope. We didn't just capitulate to everybody saying, let it go, move on. Biden's the next president. We said, no, there's something much more fundamental at stake here. And we're going to plant our flag. We're going to rally around it. And many, many Americans rallied around it too. We had hundreds of congressmen join amicus briefs, senators, everybody around the country joined our effort. And then that was in December of 2020. Biden gets sworn in, and then Attorney General Paxton assigns me. He always calls me his offensive coordinator. That's a term I like. He was our head coach. I was the offensive coordinator. I get assigned with coordinating the Texas v. Biden docket. which was a robust docket. And so, then I spent the next 2.5 to 3 years managing that, a lot of the other politically sensitive, high profile things, even if it didn't involve the Biden administration. It was big tech. It was COVID lockdowns. It was election integrity within the major, bad acting counties in the state. And I had a blast. We got Ken through a brutal primary election. We got him through a general election. He won by 10 points, despite everybody saying that he was vulnerable. And I cherish those times. And I think that it's that 3 years, among my other experiences, whether it's a Marine or working on the Texas Supreme Court, my time in private practice, my 2 years with Ted Cruz as his chief, my elevation to the Justice Department under President Trump and Attorney General Bondi. But really, it's those 3 years that I think give Texans the confidence that I've got the battle scars to really prove that I'm ready to succeed Ken as the next Texas AG. Everybody else, both the other people in the race right now and anybody else who may jump in, they will give you their policy positions. They're going to tell you what they're going to do on X or Y, Z or issue, right? But there's only one candidate in this race right now, or hypothetically moving into the future, that has the actual record and the actual battle scars to prove that he has litigated, appealed, defended, investigated, and otherwise gotten legally involved in all of the issues that Texans care about: election integrity, big tech, border security, COVID, religious liberty, guns, 10th Amendment, preserving Texas's prerogatives as a state. All of these issues, I've done it. And I think that Texans are going to be inspired by that experience. They want an AG who's going to keep his foot on the gas. And I've got the record to prove it. And I don't think anybody else does.
I want to go back to this Texas versus Pennsylvania case for a second. Because something interesting happened there, something troubling happened there, that I think too many of us didn't notice. And that is, generally, I think for most of us in the public, we are accustomed to the idea that an attorney files a lawsuit against, on behalf of their client, and then they vigorously represent their client before court, and the court makes a ruling, and the client goes, yay, or the client goes, aw, and the lawyer goes, yay, and the lawyer goes, aw, and everyone goes,
right.
But in Texas v. Pennsylvania, we saw the State Bar of Texas, after, like you said, got poured out. The Supreme Court, just for whatever stupid reasons, made their decisions, and you assume everyone's going to go home.
Right.
The State Bar of Texas decided that the people of Texas, the clients of the Attorney General, were bad people. The State Bar of Texas. And they decided that because they couldn't punish 30 million of us, they would punish the Attorney General and the first assistant, Brent Webster. Remove their law license, go after their law license, go after the ability to practice law. Unheard of behavior.
Unheard of behavior. Look, the State Bar is one of these institutions where if you only just look at their mission statement, it seems like they're an unassuming or otherwise harmless organization, right? They regulate the practice of law in Texas. Okay, I'm willing to grant, just for the sake of argument, that is a valid role that a state bar might play, right, for our profession, in the same way you have it for dentists and doctors and so forth. The problem with the State Bar of Texas is, like so many other similar organizations, and the worst example of which is the American Bar Association, has been completely captured by an ideological leftist movement, right? So leftists who are lawyers have expressed an interest in capturing this institution and then bending it to their will. So there's no question that the leadership was involved. They had a political angle. They wanted to take out Ken Paxton. They wanted to hurt. They wanted to draw blood from anybody who had, in their mind, done something unconscionable and embarrassing by filing Texas v. Pennsylvania. And they used their powers to try to hurt Attorney General Paxton and his associates. This was like early stage weaponization. Right now, it's very common. We talk about the weaponization we talk about left-wing lawfare. Guys like Attorney General Paxton and I were at the very earliest stages of weaponization. I mean, President Trump was on the early stages too, right? Where you see legal institutions, law firms, legal nonprofits, some with government power, some just, privately funded, captured by the left with a political agenda. And they prosecute their political agenda by hauling people like Attorney General Paxton to court, trying to deny them the ability to practice law, taking away their livelihoods, or at a minimum, just embarrassing and humiliating them so it's difficult to hire them or, put them on your website and so forth. It was terrible. But we lived and we litigated through all of that stuff. So again, going back to the theme I was talking about before, Texans want to see their next AG as somebody with battle scars. I've been through that before. Okay, yes, the state bar trained their guns primarily on Attorney General Ken Paxton, but for those of us who are in that inner circle, for those of us whose names were on the pleadings in Texas v. Pennsylvania.
The stain goes among more people than just them.
That's totally right. But look, they trained their guns on the AG and the First Assistant Attorney General in particular. But I've been through that. I know what it's like to be caught up in that and then have nasty leftists go on your social media or your wife's social media and say terrible things about you and print bad stories that are unfair. I've been there. I've done that. My primary opponents in this race, I'd challenge you to find a single negative thing that a Democrat has ever said about some of these challengers, or frankly, anybody else who may get in the race. I have been pilloried, doxxed, abused, but I'm preaching to the choir too, by the way. I mean, you're the master. You understand what it's like. But again, these battle scars, when I stand in front of Republican primary voters, I just have to roll up my sleeves and say, look at what I've been through. I know what it's like to be in this fight. And I'm not afraid to go against the forces of the left moving forward that are going to try to turn Texas into something that it's not.
Okay, so you left the Attorney General's office, went to work for U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, serving as his chief of staff.
That's right.
I often compare state government and the federal government to a canoe and an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
With a canoe, you can spin around really fast. One guy can make a big difference pretty quickly. Right. Aircraft carrier takes hundreds of miles to turn around.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly
big Leviathan kind of beasts.
Yes.
Going through the federal government, looking at it from the position of a chief of staff later at the DOJ, how did that impact your view of state policy?
So first of all, I loved my time with Senator Cruz. I had a full 2 years with him as his chief.
I'm not going to ask you the population of Iran or of Elgin or anything else.
I think Tucker has now taught us 94 million, isn't it? Or something like that. Senator Cruz held his own during that interview. I do enjoy the memes that have flowed from that. We always love the memes. Being Senator Ted Cruz's number 2, leading a staff of over 100 patriots on Judiciary Committee, Commerce Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, Domestic Policy, Legislative, Comms, Administrative, a just tremendous patriots working for one of our country's greatest patriots was an amazing opportunity. It was also really incredible to see somebody perform at the level that Senator Cruz performs at. I mean, this is a guy we all know. Your viewers, we all understand Ted Cruz is a champion for Texas, champion for our Constitution. But to see it up close, to see how effective he is, to see how committed he is, to see how locked in he is, and to really learn from that is an incredible experience. So I will tell you, though, that those 2 years, you're right. It's like an aircraft carrier. It's really hard to move things through. You can sort of introduce a bill and then it dies and then it goes back and then it goes to committee and then it goes back and then it has to go back into a committee and then it gets to the floor and then it dies. And then you go through this whole rigmarole through the legislative process. But I learned so much about what effective leadership looks like with Senator Cruz, despite all of those challenges, despite for, the first half of my tenure during the 118th Congress, we were in the minority. Right. Then we flipped to the 119th and we were in the majority. Senator Cruz then got the gavel he's the chairman of the Commerce Committee. And you saw that whether you're in the minority or in the majority, how you can, pull the various levers of the federal legislative process to advance an agenda. So, for example, when I was chief of staff, I helped Senator Cruz get the Justice for Jocelyn Act through. We all know Jocelyn Nungary here. She's a Houstonian, unfortunately a young girl who was killed by some Venezuelan gang members that shouldn't have been here in the first place. Her mom, Alexis, has become a real champion for border security and deporting illegal aliens that deserve it. And so that's something that we were able to get a lot of traction on and move forward. The other thing that I'm really proud to have worked on with Senator Cruz is what's called the Take It Down Act. So this is where we have a federal legislation that requires apps like Snapchat, which young people often use, if they're sharing, what are called non-consensual intimate images, right, whether they're real or in today's technological age, deepfakes, that they have an affirmative duty to take it down. That's where we got the name from. And we talked with so many moms and dads and young women who, didn't do anything wrong, but some deep fake photo of them is sent around their middle school or in their high school, and they develop suicidal ideations, and they're desperate for help. But because of Senator Ted Cruz's leadership, we advanced this Take It Down Act. And so, yeah, it is like an aircraft carrier. But when you're as effective as somebody like Senator Cruz is, you're able to nevertheless get results. Now, to your other tie-in question of what do you think about state government, though? I learned, and this is related to my time at DOJ, that serving as Texas Attorney General is, in my mind, no question, one of the most effective positions from which to advance the conservative agenda, the MAGA agenda, the America First agenda. This is an independently elected constitutional officer who presides over the largest Republican law firm in the country. There's over 600 lawyers at the AG's office, who, like a canoe, you can turn and go and stop and go as you please to advance the America First agenda, advance law and order. And so when the decision time came for me to, do I stay at the Justice Department? Do I redeploy back to Texas? Conferring with mentors like Attorney General Bondi or the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, my colleagues in the White House, what makes the most sense? It became very clear that our country and our state needs what President Trump called me, a true MAGA attorney and a warrior for the Constitution. And so to have Texans choose me to be their next Attorney General is, I think, going to be the most effective thing to accomplish our broad policy objectives, which in my mind, I think Republicans want the America First agenda.
So there'd be those who would say, what the Trump administration, your family, the Republicans in the Senate, just went through the ringer to get you confirmed there as an assistant attorney general. And now here you are, you head back to Texas. How do you address those kind of concerns of, why don't you put those guys through that if you're running for AG?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, it was part of my 2 to 3 month long due diligence process. There's a reason why when Ken announced, I didn't just announce the next day, right? I mean, this took a tremendous amount of coordination and blessing seeking from all the people who did expend political capital to get me into the Justice Department, right? I was very sensitive to that, very grateful for the time and effort, not just in the president's inner circle, but the DOJ leadership, as well as Senate leadership that helped usher me through. And so I wanted to make sure that even though I may have had an interest in running for AG, I wasn't going to spit on these people's faces by just flippantly saying, peace out, I'm going to greener pastures. Like, it's not, I'm tired of DC, I'm going back to Texas. It was nothing like that. And so anybody saying that I am abandoning my post, it's totally misleading. And number one, it's demonstrably false, because on the day that I announced that I was leaving to go run for AG, Attorney General Bondi, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, FBI Director Kash Patel, one of my fellow AAGs, Harmeet Dillon, the Weaponization Working Group Director, former acting DC U.S. Attorney Ed Martin, and a half a dozen others, people in the administration that I worked directly with, all put out statements affirming very clearly that, no, this is something that we support. We want Aaron to go back and advance the America First agenda in Texas. We understand, look, yes, people put a lot of effort in getting me to the position that I was in at DOJ, but these are very smart people, and they understand that we could probably find a replacement for Aaron at the Justice Department. But if we screw up getting the next AG and we turn it over to somebody who's not MAGA, who's not proven America first, who doesn't have the battle scars, and we just let some, generic GOP Inc. type person just sort of ride into the office, this administration's efforts and agenda will, in fact, at worst be thwarted, but at best just not have the same horsepower that they could have if you had somebody in that office. And so, look, I didn't take this decision lightly. Certainly wasn't flip about it. But if you look at the statements around the administration, when I left, people will see that this was with blessing. I mean, I'll give you another one. Tom Homan, a few days after I announced, he also put out a statement saying, Aaron was my top ally in Texas when during the Biden era, when Aaron was a deputy and I was just sort of in the private sector coordinating, immigration issues. And he looked forward to seeing what other sort of partnerships on border security that we can advance. What the Trump administration, what Texans need, I should say, what Texans need when I'm sworn in on January of 2027, for those next 2 years, is you need somebody who is going to deeply partner with the Trump admin to advance law and order, to advance justice, to defend the Constitution, to deport illegal aliens, to clean up our streets, to go after Soros-funded DAs, to secure our elections, and the list just keeps going on and on. And now Texans can have confidence that with me, I'm a known quantity who can call all of my friends that are in this administration and be particularly effective. There's no one else in this race, either presently or in the future, who's going to have those kinds of deeply rooted friendships and alliances with the administration. And so, look, I actually think, yes, I didn't choose the timing. Ken chose to announce in early April. I went through this process. Remember, Ken didn't decide to run until a week before he announced, right? And so when I started going down to Palm Beach in November, December, Ken was still the Attorney General. He had no plans to run for Senate. Of course, there were whispers. I mean, we all know this. There were whispers of it may be happening, but I can't make life decisions on hypotheticals, right? And so I advanced through the process of the Justice Department. President Trump nominated me. He called me a true MAGA attorney and a warrior for the Constitution. He specifically praised my tenure with Attorney General Paxton fighting the corrupt Biden administration. And then as days and weeks and months unfolded, Paxton announces, I do my due diligence. I get the blessing of the White House. I get the blessing of Attorney General Pam Bondi, and which is different. I want to be clear for your listeners. The total and complete endorsement is a separate conversation.
Right.
It's a separate conversation. President Trump takes that total and complete endorsement very seriously. I think we're ideally positioned to earn it. I want to earn the total and complete endorsement. So what I mean by blessing is we got the green light, we got the blessing, and you look at the statements that senior officials put out when I announced, and you'll see nobody's upset that I left. They're going to find a good assistant attorney general to replace me, and folks want to see a proven, true MAGA attorney as the next Texas AG.
We've all gotten used to watching the Attorney General of Texas sue the federal government. I think some people might be forgiven for believing that's the only job of the Attorney General.
Right.
But Attorney General Paxton, I would argue his biggest enemies were made not because he was suing the federal government, but because he went after big banks, big pharma, big tech, and you were part of that. You got him in trouble. Way to go.
We had fun doing it.
Yeah, I had fun doing that. How would you, as Attorney General, why is it important, and two, how would you, as Attorney General, continue that?
Yeah. So look, you're exactly right. Obviously, my tenure as a deputy in the AG's office under Paxton was defined primarily by Texas v. Biden, right? So I lived constant offensive plaintiff side litigation. But it's more than just going to war with the feds. I mean, now we have a friend and an ally in the office. And so there are other enemies of liberty that are roaming around this state. It's big pharma. It's big tech. It's some of the deep state actors that are still deeply embedded in our state bureaucracies. I mean, all the executive branch agencies, for the most part, have, certain, they're not totally rotten through, but there are certain rotten cores from time to time. And the AG plays a critical role in exposing that and, where appropriate, litigating that. But not just at the state level, even at the political subdivision level, right? The counties, the cities, the MUDs, the PUDs, the school districts, all of these things. the Attorney General has constitutional and statutory powers to police these political subdivisions to ensure that they're upholding the rule of law. This expresses itself, I think, most often when you talk about election integrity, right? We have an election integrity division. When I was at the AG's office, I headed up the election integrity teams during the 2020 and the 2022 cycle. So I know very much what it's like to have troops deployed in all the major blue counties that are always finding boxes under tables and so forth. But we had guys everywhere. We had our lawsuits ready to go. We had our appeals already queued up, ready to file. Once a Democratic judge denies our request, we then appeal it, right? You have to know these plays, right? And there's nobody better suited to understand, who already really knows the playbook. And look, I'll make my own mark, but I know the fundamental playbook. There's also the bread and butter work of just state lawyering, right? Which is a huge part of what the AG does. He represents the state. He represents state agencies. He represents universities. He represents, basically, if you're a state entity or if the state is involved in litigation, the Attorney General is going to represent the state's interest in court. And that's just good bread and butter government lawyering. And again, though, I have experience doing all of that stuff. You might find some of my challengers who say, oh, well, I've been around state government for longer. That's fine, but you haven't been litigating in state government for a long time. I'm the only candidate in this race right now, or into the future, that has that experience doing good bread and butter government litigation and defenses and appeals that advance the interests of the state, that advance the interests of everyday Texans. So you're right. There is the sort of headline making, explosive, fun, lawfare, right? Blue versus red versus blue, whatever. But then a huge part of what we do is just good old fashioned lawyering. And whether you are drawn to this election for the former or the latter, whichever one excites you more, I've got experience doing both. And so Texans of all stripes can confidently rely on me, cast their vote for me, because I know what I'm doing on day one, and I've got the record to prove it.
As we come to the end of our time together here, I want to ask you kind of a final question, final thought for you. But it's a question where I'm going to ask you for a question. For most of us, dealing with lawyers is somewhere between a headache and having your toenails pulled out, and if you're lucky, just seeing the obnoxious billboards on the highway. So when it comes to hiring the Attorney General of Texas, the 52nd Attorney General of Texas, what questions should Texans be asking? What questions should we be asking you and your and the others in the race? What question should they be asking of the next Attorney General?
I think the most important question that folks can ask when they're discerning who ought to be the next AG is, who has the battle scars to prove that they are ready to assume a responsibility in state office that is going to be one of the most brutal in all of state government? Who's got the battle scars? Who's got the record? I don't care about what you tell me you're going to do. I don't care about whether you mouth the appropriate lines because you've looked at polling and you see what's hot. I don't care if all of a sudden you're keen on deporting illegal aliens, right? None of that matters. Every Republican during the primary process, for the most part, is going to mouth the same lines. They're going to read the same cue cards with very little distinction. That's just the nature of primaries, right? So the only way that voters can distinguish between who's got credibility and who doesn't, who's ready and who isn't, who is ready to sort of take command of this mission essential post in state government and who's not, is whether they've got a record, whether they've got the scars, whether they've been through it. And as I've said, I am the only one who has litigated, sued, defended, appealed, and investigated on all of the major issues that Texans care about. I don't have a legislative record, but that bears almost no reflection on whether a person is fit to assume this mission essential post as Texas AG. So, do you have the battle scars? That's the only question that matters. And I think that if people get to know me a little bit more, they're going to see that I do, and that I'm ready to succeed Attorney General Ken Paxton as the 52nd Attorney General of Texas.
Aaron Reitz, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us in this edition of Real Texans.